Hello and welcome to the first lecture of the first module. I'm going to try something a little different this semester because there's only 6 of us in class. So instead of just giving a traditional lecture where you just kind of plow through and listen to me, I decided to do my lectures in VoiceThread, which means I'm going to ask you to join in the conversation and maybe even add slides to the end of the conversation or to the lecture. So we're going to try this out and see how it works. So let's start, and I'd also like your feedback on this, kind of an interactive lecture. So we are going to talk about David Merrill's first principles. I'm going to give you an overview and then ask you to contribute. So let's try it out.
Hi, Dr. Buckner. My name is Manuel Antonio Miranda. This is actually my first time doing a voice thread with video, so it seems pretty cool. And I just wanted to do this video as a test to make sure that when we get to doing other presentations and whatnot, that I'm doing it properly. So this is my test kind of deal. It's the first time that I do it, so looking forward to the semester. Thanks.
Who is David Merrill? He is a researcher, he's a professor. But what I want you to do is Google David Merrill, and I want you to add some facts to the discussion so you can tell your peers about what you've learned about David Merrill. The one thing that I found that was a personal fact that I thought was interesting is that he currently lives in Hawaii and teaches online courses at Brigham Young University. He has 9 children and 39 grandchildren. I thought it was 36. Check my facts, make sure that I'm right on this. So I'm looking forward to hear what you have to say about who is David Merrill.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Dr. Burke. So I did some research on Professor David Merrill, as you had asked. And the first thing was that I found that he does have 39 grandchildren. So that is a lot of grandkids. He does have 39 of them. The next thing that I found was that as soon as he was done with high school, he did missionary work in Ohio, Indiana, and Michigan, those 3 states. Also, he is known for 3 theories, from what I can see: the component display theory, the instructional transaction theory, and the first principles of instruction theory. So those are the couple of facts that I found about that about David Merrill. Thank you.
Hello, everyone, and Dr. Buckner. An interesting fact that I found out about Dr. David Merrill is that he is a pioneer in the development of computer-based instruction, where he led a team to develop an instructional authoring system known as time-shared interactive computer-controlled information television, which still serves as a benchmark for the development of computer-assisted instruction to this day.
Hello all. Very nice to see some familiar faces. So what about Dr. Merrill? I initially became familiar with Dr. Merrill's work back in the mid-'80s when I was taking courses at ASU in instructional design. But I happened to revisit his work in the late '80s, early '90s, when I was employed as an instructional designer at a company where we produced and published both instructor-led and computer-based courseware. One of the products I worked on was described as a concurrent computer-based training, which we developed on a platform that was similar to Dr. Merrill's description of ID Expert. ID Expert was an attempt to automate the instructional design authoring process. While ID Expert showed great promise, the funding for Dr. Merrill's project was unceremoniously cut short, and a fully developed commercial application never materialized. But what I find particularly interesting about ID Expert is that Dr. Merrill had envisioned incorporating a function into ID Expert that would allow for student performance monitoring in order to automatically adjust instruction parameters to accommodate the learning needs of the learner. In other words, personalized adaptive learning. This is a hot trend we've been seeing in online instruction for the last several years. This is 2017. Dr. Merrill was truly ahead of his time. Now, when they were developing ID Expert, the programming and application development was a lot more involved than the technology allows for today. There's rapid prototyping, there's rapid development, but it's unfortunate that they weren't able to see ID Expert to its full potential. Anyway, the other thing I saw in my search was he has a personal webpage now at mdavidmerrill.com. He says he's retired and living in St. George, Utah, but he still remains active and he teaches online. Also, he says he has 37 plus 6 by marriage grandkids, which means 43 grandkids. And also, I'll add a link to a fairly recent article, an introspection by Dr. Merrill that was published this past March. And it gives a full outline of his 50 plus years of career.
Hey guys, I took a look around and I found a lot of the same kind of professional things that David Merrill is known for. I poked around on his website like Joan did, and I found his railroading blog that he keeps with his wife. Well kept, it's a little outdated, but I love that he included on his blog. You've got this really well-known person in the field who shows us this personal side of himself, and I always love that, being a teacher and seeing that in teachers. I'll drop the link to his blog if you want to see some personal pictures and his passion.
I know so much more about David Merrill than if I had just given you a lecture on it. Thanks for sharing. Ashley, thanks for sharing that blog. That was cool. So thanks for contributing to the conversation on David Merrill. I hope you learned more about him than just his contribution to instructional design, but we find that he's human. And I think when we do that, we tend to embrace more of what he's doing than just some theorist out there in the clouds somewhere. So thanks for contributing to the conversation. So let's go over a little bit about what are the first principles of instruction. So we're going to unpack these a little bit, but I kind of wanted to give you an overall viewpoint of the first principles. So learning is promoted when learners are engaged in solving real world problems. Existing knowledge is activated as a foundation for new knowledge. New knowledge is demonstrated to the learner. New knowledge is applied by the learner, and new knowledge is integrated into the learner's world. So we're going to unpack each one of these, and what I want you to do is think about a scenario of example, and you can discuss it in each slide, but at the end, what I'm going to have you do is take a learning experience all the way through these 5 principles. So I want you to be thinking about that as we're unpacking each of these first principles of instruction. So here are the phases of effective instruction. 5 words: engagement, activation, demonstration, application, implementation. We're going to go over these 5 and give examples. So let's move on. Let's start with engagement. You want to focus the learner on solving or exploring a real world issue or problem. I want you to give an example of how you might engage a student in a learning situation. My example would be, what are the steps in achieving a level in a new video game? So I'm engaging the learner by saying, hey, we're going to learn a new video game. How would you go about doing that? Getting them interested in solving the problem or looking into how they're going to level in a video game. Next, we have activation. You want to activate the learner's existing knowledge to create new knowledge. If you're not familiar with the funds of knowledge, that might be a theory that you look at. It's applied to K-12, but that's something that you might reference. So how might the instruction activate prior knowledge? I want you to give me some examples of this. My example is, going back to my first one, is I have played other games, but not this one. However, many games are similar, so I'm going to pull on what I know from other games to help me learn this game. Demonstration is next. You want to show the learner what they need to learn. I worded this question wrong, so I'm gonna rephrase it a little bit. So how would you show or demonstrate learning to the learner with your example? For me, I will watch a friend play the game and talk me through the gaming strategies. So it's not the learner demonstrating their learning, but rather you demonstrating what needs to be learned. Sorry, I messed up on that question. So anyway, give me an example. Next is application. This is getting the learner to actually apply the information that they have learned. What are some techniques that you can use to simulate application in the learning environment? My example is that I would play the game myself, and through trial and error, I would learn more strategies. I find that you learn by failing more than you actually learn by succeeding. What's your example? Integration. This is where the rubber meets the road. You want to challenge the learner to take their learning into the real world and apply it to a situation. Give an example of how you have experienced this in your own learning journey. My example is, I will successfully learn the game and I will show others the strategy of the game, or may even go a step further and start creating my own game. So now it's your turn. We've had a discussion about the 5 principles of instruction. Now I want you to take them and apply them to a teaching and learning situation. Once you've done that, maybe take a break, come back to this lecture, come to this slide, and give feedback to your peers' ideas about how they went about applying the 5 principles instruction to their certain teaching and learning situation. I look forward to listening to everybody's ideas and to contributing to the discussion.
As a librarian, I work with our introductory writing and English courses, and every semester students have to conduct a library research and write a paper on a controversial issue. So for engagement, how does the high cost of textbooks directly affect your life as a college student, and why do prices seem to be going up? For the activation component of prior knowledge, from the student's perspective, every semester I, the student, have course books that seem to rise in cost every semester or every year, and I am unsure why. So demonstration, I as the instructor can demonstrate by sharing my research strategies to locate background information on resources that discuss the rising cost of textbooks and the ways it affects college students. Application, so students can use the research techniques I demonstrated and apply them to their own searches in library databases. And finally, for integration, for the research paper, students can now take their researched evidence and align it to how the high cost of textbooks directly affect their own personal lives. So maybe students will argue that it negatively affects their grades, or that they forego purchasing because they have other bills to pay. So whatever evidence they find, they must weave it into their own paper to provide their own perspective of how it personally affects them.
Hi, Monique. It was an interesting topic that you chose to demonstrate how you have used Merrill's first principles of instruction, the 5 principles that make up his first principles of instruction, in your job as a librarian in helping students do a writing assignment in an English class. Just, I have a couple of questions and some comments because I was a little bit confused. It was the assignment is to research and write about a controversial topic, and then you used an example of the high cost of textbooks. So is this topic the same topic each class, or do the students actually choose and research their own particular topic, and you were just using the one example of the controversial topic of textbooks rising costs? If it's the latter, and they do that every semester, is it the idea that if they're required to write about the controversial subject, do they then present perhaps they're solving a problem? How are they solving the problem? Which is really the basis of Merrill's first principles of instruction, that the instruction should be based on the student is going to be solving a problem. So with that said, in your example of, the rising costs of textbooks, do the students suggest other means of solving the problem of the rising costs of textbooks? Like, for instance, okay, I can rent textbooks. I can ask my instructor to choose other sources that might be free to substitute for the textbook, things like that. But, bottom line is, I guess if we're going to suggest using Merrill's first principles of instruction within a writing assignment context, I would think that in the end, the culmination of the project would be in the integration. All right, we've done all this. We've done perhaps in the portion of teaching them how to write this research report that we've had some examples of activation, which you've described very well, and how you would demonstrate how you would apply, but in the end, and the integration. And the integration is, to have them become better writers, correct? Better researchers, understand how they can use the library more efficiently, effectively, which is, of course, 2 words that you see Merrill say all the time: efficient and effective learning. So anyway, just some thoughts. I'm kind of winging it here. But overall, this is enjoyable. All right, thanks.
Hi Joan, thank you for your comments and feedback. To answer your questions, is this topic the same topic for each class? Yes and no. Yes, for it being a controversial topic on their choice, and no, because students select their own particular topic that falls within the category of a controversial issue. And you're correct, I used the high cost of textbooks just as an example. How are students solving the problem to the controversial topic is what you asked. So the students use evidence from their research to develop a plausible solution. Their explanation has to be based in scholarly research from experts in the field. And lastly, yes, you are correct. In the end, they do have the integration, like you mentioned, and goes along with Dr. David Merrill's efficient and effective learning. An example of this is the integrated understanding of the topic that they have chosen by using a real-world issue that is relatable to them. I think taking a controversial topic that they have a high interest in draws upon the social and emotional aspect to their lives, which then creates a platform for meaningful learning. I hope these explanations help and provide a little bit more insight, and thank you for your comments and feedback. Also, the integration piece is students demonstrating improvement in their newly acquired skills through their research papers. I think this can be also measured with something maybe like a pre and post test of student knowledge, with the pre-test that consists of something like having students just write a one-page assessment of what they know about the topic and what they feel the solution should be on a controversy, and then comparing what the student knew before in the pre-test to what they know after in the post-test as they integrate scholarly evidence into their analysis and solution paper, the paper, of course, being the post-test, which hopefully does demonstrate an improvement in their newly acquired skills and knowledge.
Hi, this is Mike Mowry. My area is on Linux, which I taught for the Army to new maintainer students for a while. And engaging real world is, first off, we'd always talk about that we had, in our area, we had a lot of systems using Linux, and see what kind of experience or knowledge folks had from before that. So keep emphasizing the importance of these tasks were necessary to maintain and administer and integrate those types of computers. So when we'd get the folks, we'd get them right out of Windows. So there's a lot of things that we could talk about, their existing knowledge to build on, and things we can compare and contrast from Windows in that. Also see how many people in smartphones had Android, which runs on a Linux-based operating system along with some other embedded devices and such. The demonstration, a lot of things we would actually have stuff up on the board to demonstrate, or we'd have our own position that we could demonstrate things on while we were getting the students ready to go into it. Had a lot of hands-on practical exercises, so they had a chance to apply it right away. And then for integration into the real life, afterwards, the next block would be routers and integration, so they'd be using that again, and also Linux comes up again later on in the course in some of the systems. So that is what I had to say about that.
Hi, Mike. So here are some thoughts I have regarding your comments. I personally believe that the 5 principles that make up Merrill's first principles of instruction theory lend themselves very well for teaching systems and network administration, which is what you described. Based on your comments, you mentioned how you are teaching students Linux that are coming from the Windows world. All right, so as an example of a real world problem, which is the crux of Merrill's first principles of instruction, that students should be engaged in solving a real world problem. One example is, how would you integrate a Linux system into a non-Linux network environment, such as a Windows-based environment like Windows Active Directory. So there's the problem. How do we get a Linux box talking to the Windows boxes? And so all the key principles, activation, they've got prior knowledge of previous operating systems, demonstration. You can talk about the ins and outs of all the steps and procedures to get a Linux box running, to integrate it into the new network environment, and then the application, hands-on, absolutely, installing the packages, configuring the packages. Let's say, for instance, you decide you're going to use Samba. All right, so that Samba in the Active Directory environment, and then using LDAP and Kerberos. These are all just perfect. But finally, the key thing is the integration then comes with the new knowledge where they can take that knowledge and take on similar challenges in the system and network administration roles. So, like, they can develop scripting skills that then would be like what Merrill gets all excited about, makes for more efficient and effective instruction, because the students will say, okay, this is something I can use, I can continue to use, I can develop, and it's a real world application. So So now that we've learned all that with Merrill's first principles of instruction, has it prompted you to redesign any of your instruction to further integrate Merrill's theories? Oh, one final comment is power to the penguin.
So as a training manager for the Finances Help Center, we assist students to fill out the FAFSA form, which is the free application for student aid. So for my 5 levels of instruction, I will be using the financial aid example. For engagement, the first question we pose to the student is, what are the steps to completing the FAFSA form? Next, for the activation, we say or we ask, we let them know that they filled out financial aid forms before, where personal information is required. We let them know this is similar to the process of filling out the actual FAFSA form, except that it's in a centralized format. Next, for demonstration, I have the experience of filling out the FAFSA form, as I've done it plenty of times before, so I will usually walk the learner through this. For the application principle, we actually have a testing platform through the Department of Education where we have the learner practice filling out the form. If a mistake is made at that point, we provide feedback right away. And finally, for the integration principle, here we allow the learner to walk a student through the actual FAFSA form themselves, and they can do this as many times as needed with different students.
Hello, Manuel. I found that your example was great because it exactly aligns with Dr. David Merrill's first principles using your financial aid example, what are the steps to complete the form, how they filled out the financial aid before, filled out personal info, demonstrating filling out the FAFSA form, due to your extensive experience of working with students and filling it out, testing the platform where students fill out the form, and integration where the learner walks through the FAFSA form themselves and participates in what sounds like a peer-to-peer teaching. I like how students are engaged in, of course, a real-world task, and according to Merrill, the activity that you provide is the whole task. I like your method of, I also like your method within the activation piece where you have students call upon their prior knowledge of filling out personal and financial information and past experiences. I think this step provides opportunities for the educator to understand and assess where students are at their knowledge base, especially because each student is different. Thank you for your example. It really provided me with some clarity on how the principles can apply to even the Finances Help Center at an education institution.
So as an ESL teacher, I would often start the lesson by telling maybe a humorous story or giving a funny example of something that had happened to me, either as a teacher of language learners or as a language learner in another country learning the language and the culture that pertained to the topic that we were doing. And I tried to grab my students with humor and maybe ham it up a little with some effects. And that way that they were kind of engaged in what we were going to do, and also were ready to activate, which is, maybe share something that could be a little bit embarrassing or kind of funny that had happened to them. You always, as a language learner, have some funny things about the topic at hand. So they would usually share that with each other and maybe share it out with the group. And then when we moved into the demonstration phase, we would look at a couple of examples of something that went really well and why did that go well, and something that went really poorly and maybe had some pragmatic issues and why did it go so poorly. And then we would examine the language. During the application phase, I often ask students to come up with a role play or a scenario, something common taken from the real world that happened to them, and try then to apply the language that we were discussing in an appropriate way. And then for the integration phase, to kind of reflect on what we had learned in class, the things that we had gone over, wrapped it up, and then take what we had learned and talked about out into the real world, and engage in a person in conversation where you need to do this thing, maybe ask for permission or make a request or something like that, and see how it went. and then report back to the class next time about it.
Okay, hi, this is Mike. Just adding some comments on some of the other folks' work to this conversation, since it's at the point to do that. I'm going to kind of consolidate everybody. I hope you don't mind. So, Monica, your stuff about being a librarian, that's pretty good. That was the original search engine. Was a good research librarian. An English paper deal and the example using the cost of books. I don't know if that's something that's a common topic that comes up, in the semester for folks, but makes you think. This whole deal is very good, and very poignant and such, being college students. Fortunately, this online program, I haven't had to buy a whole lot of books, which I am very thankful for. So, but just even taking that and using that to walk through the process is enjoyable. Manuel, the FAFSA, I didn't know. Maybe that's a new thing, since whenever the last time I had to do FAFSA was, there was actually training and practice deals that could online and get it done right. So that's really good to know. Again, one of those things you wouldn't think about to use in this process. And then Ashley, ESL, yeah, I can kind of relate a little bit to language stuff. I have spent time being in several other countries, and anywhere from a couple of weeks to a few months to a couple of years. And unfortunately, I wasn't real good at picking up a lot of language on some of these places. I can say thank you in, I don't know, 8 or so languages, and ask for beer and bread in about 2, and that's my extent of that. But and that's a real, absolutely hands-on, need to get out and do it type of thing to really learn. I had a couple of years of language in high school, and that's one of the ones that I can ask for beer and bread in. So that's my comments on everybody else's stuff. I hope that helps.
Hey, I really enjoyed hearing about how everyone incorporates these steps into the things that they're teaching and help others learn. And it seems like many of us do them pretty naturally. And I'm guessing that's because a lot of us, it sounds like, work with adults, and they really like that real work, hands-on, project-based stuff, because they're already out in the real world doing it every day. So that was neat to hear about, and especially like the FAFSA, which that I don't think that existed, like Mike said, when I was filling out the FAFSA. And that's nice to have something so high stakes have these kinds of things that you can do first. So that was really cool. So thanks for sharing those.
Hello. So I guess it's my turn to talk about how I've applied Merrill's first principles of instruction in a teaching and learning situation. I'll use an example of a project I've been working on with my husband for the last couple of years. My husband is a geochemist. He's a faculty member in the School of Earth and Space Exploration here at Arizona State University, and he's a world expert in a technique called secondary ion mass spectrometry. Say that really fast. We'll just call it SIMS, S-I-M-S, going forward, so SIMS. The lab that he runs is a National Science Foundation facility, meaning that it's open to people from all over the world to come and work on this particular instrument. And so it's used for surface analysis of terrestrial and other planetary materials, and is also used in the material science area, like the semiconductor industry, for quality control of computer components, namely RAM and other delicate computer components. So because he's an expert, well, he was asked to put together a workshop where he invites people to come and learn about SIMs, how to operate the SIMs, how to do analysis and data processing on the SIMs, and apply it to their particular research. So this is a perfect example of applying Merrill's first principles of instruction. And let me describe what we do. It's a 3-day workshop. It's an in-person workshop. And before we start the workshop, we give a pre-test survey to gauge our users' previous experiences and knowledge of the subject matter. And that's the activation principle. We're using the activation principle there. So once we determine people's level of knowledge, their experience, then as the workshop is conducted, we can make adjustments to accommodate. Now, in the first day of the workshop, after brief lectures that also activate the learner's new knowledge or previous knowledge, they get a tour of the lab, they get a demonstration of the parts of the SIMs, and there's other demonstrations as well. The workshop employs a number of demonstrations. In fact, at the end of my little talk here, I'll attach to the end of this lecture in a VoiceThread slide one of the demonstrations that I recorded, and just to share with you so you see what we're trying to do. Anyway, so the demonstrations, of course, activate the demonstration principle. Well, by the second day, the users are then introduced to the applications of SIMs. Like how can I use this? How do I use this? And that means that a sample is prepared, and they watch as the sample is run by the SIMs and see how the resulting data is collected, is processed, and then interpreted. So that is the application principle. So by the third and final day, there is real-time dialogue as to what they learned the previous 2 days prior. Any demonstrations they may review, and maybe run another analysis on the SIMs to get an idea of the tricks of the trade, as it were. And then, but it's really their dialogue onto how can they apply what they've just learned to their own real world problems. So let's say somebody is studying volcanic ash, right? They're a PhD student, and they've been asked to do analysis on the materials that they collected at a particular field site. And so now they come to the workshop, they understand how to prepare a sample for the SIMs, how to run that sample on the SIMs, then collect the data and do an analysis, and then write a story about the sample, and perhaps solve another piece of the puzzle to their scientific question of the volcanic ash. So that all is together at the integration principle. So I hope I've somewhat described to you what we've done. The exciting thing is that this workshop has been an in-person workshop, but it's been so popular that he sells it out in like less than 8 hours. As soon as he advertises it, it's done once a year, it sells out. So the last couple of months, I have been helping him develop, so it's an online course. So we're hoping to have it be delivered remotely, online, and we're hoping to get, fingers crossed, funded by the National Science Foundation to do this project.
Hi, Joan. It's Mike. I really wanted to reply on your posting there. That is one pretty serious deal that your husband's working with there. That SIMS I mean, it's seriously a no joke, no lie, probably pretty expensive type of deal. So when he's got folks coming in for this workshop and whatnot, and then I'm sure it's kept busy when it's not conducting the workshops, all doing other things. Is something like that available other places, or is it there at ASU? Has got like the only one or one of the only ones? It is. That sounds like something that's on on one of these big time crime solving, CSI, NCIS type of things or something. So, but yeah, I mean that's a real good thing to, like I say, really involve all those principles and all without having to contrive it and whatnot. So I'm glad that's popular and everything, and hope that online version goes well. I don't know how your online version is going to work as far as the hands-on. I mean, you can get the demonstration, but of course you can't really have somebody. Yeah, here's my sample of volcanic ash, which kind of struck out to me uh, when you mentioned that. So to test, like I say, if you can do, somebody could attend the online version where they've got it their own, whether at their home facility, um, to work with that and kind of follow along, or maybe they've got to travel from whatever part of the country or the world that they're in to some other major university to use that, but then have the uh, watch the workshop online and everything. So that would be the other question, I guess, is once folks attends the workshop, and some of them, the fortunate ones, it's been able to have their sample run through as part of the hands-on, actually doing and integrating portion. Then what do they do when they go back if they have something similar that they can use to the Sims? That video you attached also was pretty interesting. I didn't understand all that, but so I just wanted to say that's some pretty neat stuff there. And of course, as always, power to the penguins.
Hi, Lauren. I wanted to say, first of all, good job on incorporating humor into your course. I think with humor, you're able to engage students better. They are able to learn more and apply what they've learned. As an ESL student myself, growing up, I think humor played a big role in the way that I learned. So I appreciate the way that you're doing it with your course right now. And I just want to commend you for it. Keep doing that, because humor is one of those things that, like I said before, it engages the student. It keeps them attracted to the subject, which is ESL. But mostly they remember those stories. So I just want to say good job, keep that up, and thank you.
What a fantastic discussion. I really loved hearing about everyone's examples and about everyone's life. So keep up this kind of conversation. I'm going to continue to do the lecture where I'm asking you some questions and asking you to participate. So fantastic first go at this. Thanks for sharing your lives, your stories, and how you would implement the 5 principles of instruction into your particular teaching or learning environment. So thanks a lot. See you in Module 2.
Welcome to the workshop on Sims. Applications to Sims. Loading a sample. This is the sample airlock. There's a flange facing us and with a turbopump hanging down below it. We're going to vent this so we can put a new sample in. We're right now pointing at the flange that we're going to open. In order to open that flange, we need to vent it. The vent button is shown right here. The act of pushing that vent button enables dry nitrogen gas to flow into the vacuum chamber. After about 20 seconds, the flange will pop open. When the flange pops open, we pull it out, revealing a clip. This is where we're going to put the new sample for analysis. Here you can see our analyst sliding a sample holder containing the new material for analysis into the clip. And now you can see our analyst sliding the flange with the new sample safely clipped in place into the vacuum chamber. Now the analyst pushed the pump button. Pressing this button will allow the vacuum pumps to take all the air out of that airlock and reach a vacuum that we can analyze the sample at. Now that the new sample is safely under vacuum, our analyst can get back to her job of making high-quality chemical analyses using the ASU SIMS.